Hello and welcome to Story Mode. This is episode 23. As always, let me know if there's any issues with the audio in the chat. Yeah, thank you very much for watching. So if you've never seen this show, but there was a lot of thumping sound, and I was trying to figure out where that was coming from. I was like, that isn't me, is it? So,
No, it's me.
Okay, well, stop it. Anyway, thank you very much for tuning in, everybody, and welcome to Story Mode. So if you haven't seen this show before, it's pretty simple. We don't have a guest today, so it's going to make the intros real easy. This is a full spoiler cast, so we sit down and talk about a game that we played over the past month. This is a monthly show, and this time we're going to be discussing Tacoma by Fulbright Studios. This is a complete spoiler cast, so if you haven't played the game or you are sensitive to spoilers, maybe zip it because yeah, it's gonna be a problem. Anyways, real quick introductions. My co-host Lewis and Eggman. So Lewis, how are you doing today, man?
I'm doing good. So yeah, hi, I'm Lewis, also known as LRFLEW, also known as the person who's really terrible at these intros.
You're getting better. And Eggman, how are you doing today, sir?
Doing pretty good. I had to tear myself away from Guild Wars this week because a new expansion was just released a couple weeks ago to play Tacoma. I really enjoyed it though, as we'll find out.
This is, production values for like the tiny little package that this thing is. There's some incredible acting in there. I think like that's one of the highlights of the game for me. Honestly, it's just the world building and the voice acting and just the way the game feels world-wise. It's very believable.
Mm-hmm.
So
some of the details that are in this game are actually insane, but we can go into those as we start discussing it.
Yeah. So this is from the folks who brought us a game called Gone Home, which we haven't talked about on this stream specifically, but they were kind of known initially for being the second successful walking simulator. First one, well, there was kind of like three that came out around the same time. There was Dear Esther, which was controversial because some people were like, "Oh my god, it's not a video game." Then there was Gone Home and Stanley Parable. And Gone Home had a little bit of controversy around it when it first came out because it was very short and it was $20, and that really brought the price to hour count discussion forward, I think, in games a lot more than it had been before, at least in among the indie scene, and it really got that conversation going, which is maybe a conversation we can have here because this game's also really short. That being said, I'm okay with that, and so should we get started? Does anybody want to give us a synopsis? This is a sci-fi story starting off with, kind of in the vein of another game that we talked about called Event Zero. Like art style wise, you could have told me this was the same game and I would have believed you. Like
I think visually they're different. There's definitely a distinction there, but narratively they're very similar.
Visually, they've got that same kind of like Event Zero is darker. This one's a much brighter game. It's a much more cheerful, easy on the eyes game. That being said, I do think that Event Zero has kind of the same retro kind of 70s future look to it, maybe even a little bit more so, but
I mean, I don't
Art Deco kind of thing.
that I agree, because the concept of Event Zero was that this station was built in the 70s, whereas in this game we find that it's literally 100 years after. It takes place in the real world 100 years after Event Zero, but it's on the same universe.
Close to the moon.
Just takes, yeah,
one was retrofuturism, one was futurism.
Yes.
Yeah, well, aesthetically, I find them similar. So our story starts, and you have the most annoying computer voice in the world flying inside of some sort of cockpit.
What?
Okay.
Minnie was great. Don't you badmouth Minnie. Minnie was the best character.
I've been playing Elite for a very long time now, over the last couple weeks, and that game has a lot of really good computer voices. Sorry, but like that immediately made me want to punch it.
I love Minnie. Minnie was great.
Cheerful and happy, but it was like cheerful and happy and you want to squish it kind of way.
Yeah.
Like, shut up.
I mean, we can only assume that it was grown that way for a reason, but that's getting into a little bit of the AI stuff. Anyways, I can give a quick synopsis if
Go right ahead.
Yeah. So you start off and you play as Amy Ferrier. Her full name is longer, but she is referred to
Amy.
as Amy. And you're sent to the ship on contract, or at least it appears at the beginning of the game that you're sent on contract from Venturis Technologies, who is the company that owns and maintains the space station and pays the wages for everybody there, all of whom are contractors. So you go there and you go through this first room and you put on these AR like contact things,
buttons,
and it basically overlays an AR thing over everything so that you can see like where different shafts lead to, and it tells you what doors you can open.
When you're putting those on,
different things like that.
You also sign an agreement or click an I agree to this thing, basically saying that the AI in this station is going to be recording everything that you do and storing it in a data bank. So essentially everything in 3D is constantly being recorded on the entire station at all times, regardless of what's happening where, and the AI knows where you are and what you are doing. Which is like a disclaimer that you read at the beginning and then sign. It's like, this is a little close to real world.
Yeah, and so the contract that you're given from Venturis basically states that you are to go there and retrieve the AI unit and then take it out and submit it back to Venturis. And along the way, you find that in your log or whatever, there are 6 crew members, and you learn about these crew members as you go through the ship, and you find that it wasn't an accident, and there's a lot more
going on.
Yeah. Beyond even this simple storyline that I've laid out in front of you, there are also relationships between the crew members that you kind of follow, and they each have their own fears and reservations and relationships with people back on Earth or off of Earth.
I need to mention something because we talked about this off stream before the show started, but this game is executed in exhaustive detail, like to the point where it's a little bit excessive. The way the gameplay works is you essentially, as we described earlier, you have this overlay, right? For anybody who hasn't played it, you have this overlay, and then you walk into an area, and then it'll say replay recording. You hold down whatever the button is you have bound, and then kind of a 3D video with 3D representations of these different characters. They're very obvious who each person is. You hover over them, it shows their name and their picture. They have symbols on their back saying what their job is, and it's very obvious who's who because they all have very different silhouettes. And then you walk around in these scenes, not in a non-linear format, but you can kind of go to one or the other usually. And you walk through these scenes and you listen to them talk, and you can scrub around through it, and you find specific clues on their displays. You can see what they're looking at any given time when they pop up their displays. And by doing this, you get to know these characters, learn about the world, and experience the story.
Yeah, it's worth pointing out that the things that they're talking about, the stuff, the whatever, it's called ARdware. And if you don't know, AR stands for augmented reality, which is a thing that is actually kind of being developed in the real world. But the idea is that everything you're seeing is being presented as the sort of augmented reality. You're in that space where they were, but there's sort of holograms that are being projected
also,
to
there's a cat.
Show you where they were. Oh, and there's a cat. Yeah.
Cat's important. I think so.
Very important.
Kind of the 9th character, but there's an achievement for finding the cat everywhere, and I didn't do that.
I didn't do it either. I gave up. I looked for it in the first 2 rooms, and then I just kind of was like, I don't know where the cat is.
He was hidden pretty well in one of the spots.
Yeah, so basically, the first, well, I actually skipped the observation room. I don't know if you guys did that one first or the personnel room first.
I did the observation room last, actually.
I did it last too.
It was the very last thing I did.
Yep. It was kind of awkward, but it's a little conversation to kind of introduce you to the forward or fast forwarding AR recording mechanic. It's not really much of importance is said there. And then you go down to the personnel room where they're having this thing that they call the obsolescence party, which is kind of poking fun at themselves because they're all on contract and their terms are always for a year. So they're all they all have to kind of wait now to see if their contract gets renewed.
Do you know why they called it obsolescence party?
I'm not even
Well,
sure I
because
know what that word means.
they're
Like in
poking
that
fun at
context.
themselves, right? Because
Yeah.
they're becoming obsolete.
No, it's actually kind of more ironic than that, because
Oh,
the game takes place in the year 2088, but there's a thing that's an email you can find on someone's HUD, basically, that talks about how in 1980 it was going to be the end of humans basically manning the ships in space. It was all going to be AI controlled back in
2080?
2080. Yeah, 2080.
Yeah.
And then they ended up passing a bill called the something accord.
Human
Hold on, let me double
Oversight
check my notes.
Accord. Human
Yeah.
Oversight Accord.
The Human Oversight Accord, which basically mandated that any ship with an AI pretty much needs to have 3 people for a crew up to 3 months or 6 people for a crew up to a year.
We should
And so,
we should mention right off the bat you're introduced to the AI, who's Odin, who's below me, because we didn't have a guest. So
Odin is our guest.
So Odin is the all-encompassing AI and also a very interesting character in and of himself. He's kind of manning everything. He's telling everybody what to do. During the obsolescence party, he's instructing them how to make how to make the cake to his exact, like, he's giving them the recipe. Specifications. That's the word I was looking for. So he is kind of like the manager, I guess. If you
basically he's like a personal assistant, and you find out later, I think it's worth mentioning now, that the AI is developed in a very interesting way in that it's grown, and so it uses wetware as opposed to what we would call hardware, which would be like your computer. So there's actually an organic component to this AI, and it has to be taught over time. One of the crew members is actually the AI network specialist, yeah, and she takes care of the AI and helps it learn and increases its AI competency scores and stuff.
Yeah, kind of towards the end of the game, they have a whole thing that's showing like line graphs of a whole bunch of different measurements that they'd measure an AI on, and like they have to routinely verify those scores and make sure they're up to snuff.
Yeah.
And so at this party, there's all of a sudden there's this big boom, and everybody like jumps 5 feet to the side, and they're like, "Oh, something must have happened." And Odin informs them that the ship has been hit by debris, and they only have 50 hours of oxygen remaining.
Luckily, everybody's in this room.
Yeah, and they it's only so much oxygen remaining, and all outside communications have been cut off.
Yep. And so then you have that's where the sci-fi story begins, I guess. The disasters happened.
And you're watching these recordings, and for each recording, there's a couple things I want to mention. It tells you when the recording happened, and all the ones that are talking about this incident that happened with the fake meteorite, which I've already mentioned,
are in the last 3 days.
In the last 3 days. So this event happens 3 days before you arrive on the ship, and there's also, when you start each of the larger AI segments, the important ones with substance and not just music, it's like glitchy text, because the AI, they think they tried to remotely wipe the AI, but it didn't work. And so a lot of text in the game a lot of digital text has just like turned into garbage, basically.
Yeah.
And when the AR recording is starting, you'll see that the text flashes, and there's a series of messages there. For example, the first one says "death sentence," which is pretty ominous.
Yeah, a little bit. I remember seeing that going, okay.
I thought that originally was talking about you, because at the beginning we said that the Venturis tells you, don't touch anything, don't interact with the AI, just do your job and leave. And you're like, well, when you plug in the device to take the AI off the ship, it goes like 0.1% in like 10 seconds. You're like, well, it's take forever. So obviously you have to leave and go do all this
It
stuff.
actually won't complete unless you've done everything.
Yeah, it won't. And so I was like, my actions are being recorded, so Venturis knows that I will have interacted with the AI. Now I'm being sentenced to death, I guess. That's what
I actually was thinking that it would be fascinating if it would be possible to just plug the thing in, wait for it to finish, unplug it, go to the next one, plug it in, wait for it to finish, unplug it, go to the next one, plug it in, wait for it to finish, go to the end, get the AI, and leave.
Tacoma low percent run.
Yeah.
Just ignore everything.
Yeah.
So did anybody actually try to sit there and wait for the whole time? Because it does advance very slowly. It takes so long though that
I bet it would stall after a certain point.
I would hope so, at least.
Yeah.
You want me to look
And
it
plus,
up?
I'm pretty sure you actually don't even need to do all that much to get it to progress. So I'm pretty sure that you could probably beat that game in like 5 to 10 minutes on a speed run.
Fast
but
forward through everything?
You would have to go and leave it to do that.
Fast forward, pause, click on the... Anyways. Yeah, no, you could beat it pretty quickly.
Yeah. And so that's the kind of setup. And in the first area so in each of the areas, there's 2 crew members' personal quarters. And so the first one that you see is Evie, and she's the crew captain, I believe.
Was she the first?
At least that's the one I did first, because you went to the obsolescence party first once you went into the personnel module, correct?
I think the first time I did, though. The second time I played this game twice, and the other time I went the other way because I realized
I feel
that
like
was
that
first.
was supposed to go first. Yeah, I also did.
Chronologically, they do, because the one to the other side happened 4 days prior, and the obsolescence party was 3 days prior.
Yeah, I did the party first, and then I went on to the other one. I was like, oh, I should have done this one first.
Oh yeah, I just realized that I did them. Okay, so that brings up an interesting point, because I was kind of curious. I wondered to myself after I did that, I'm like, oh, this seemed to be in chronological order, but I remember having a choice. So could I have done them in the other order? And I only realized that after the second ring that you go through. And in the third ring, you can only go one way because the other door is broken. And so I was like, oh, that must have been how the other ones were. And I just didn't go look at the door to see if it was broken. But I think you can get the context fine, even if you do them out of order, especially for that first one. But it is a little bit strange that you can do that just of your own choice.
Yeah.
Yeah, it gives a little bit of freedom.
That's true. But I guess my personal experience was improved because I happened to pick in the biomed ring, the botany area first, which is chronologically first in the story.
Yeah.
I did it the other way, and I was able to make enough sense of it, but when I went back to the other one, it was like, oh, I should have done this one first. Oh well.
What I did
was
just
keep going.
After the first one, when I got it backwards, I would go to one, check, see when it is, go to the other one, check, see when it is, run around, find all the recordings, check when they all are, and then go in order.
Yeah.
That's what I did after that. Okay.
Yeah. So there's a couple clues that we get in these first couple of recordings. One is that there's this other company that, who was it that was talking to them? I think it was
Carnival.
Yeah, Carnival. It was Clive that was talking to Carnival, and he had a friend on Carnival. Think of him like Carnival Cruises, but in space. And he talks about a cruise that left 8 months ago and is just returning back to Earth now, or maybe leaving again soon.
It was slingshotting around the sun, apparently.
Yeah, slingshotting around Seoul.
Yeah, and so he has this friend Jermaine, and he's talking with them about this long trip that they're doing, because it's an 8-month round trip on this luxury cruise, basically. And we don't learn a lot more than that at that point, but we just know that it exists, and they're kind of one of the main competitors to Venturis. It's worth mentioning too that you kind of figure this out right away as soon as you access any of the crew members' desks, because there's a sponsored ad, like say Windows gives you an ad baked into your OS. It's kind of like that, but for Venturis, and it advertises their luxury belt of condos that apparently I'm assuming it goes around the Earth to like
Yeah.
or something.
That was
And
kind
so
of the implication, is basically a series of ships around the Earth. The Venturis Belt, I think is what they're calling it.
yeah, and so that's why Carnival is a competitor to Venturis, because they're also providing luxury like getaways basically. But
Venturist struck me more of like a hotel. It's like, come here and stay.
It's worth pointing out that there's a sort of theme that gets established, particularly in that kind of day before the incident, that they talk about a few company names, most of which exist. Like if you ignore Venturis for a minute, they mentioned Carnival Cruise, through the Carnival system.
Yep.
And they also mentioned both Hilton and Amazon in terms of universities, which sort of creates this sense that the world is sort of controlled by these large corporations at this point, that the countries themselves don't matter as much as what corporation you go to school to and you work with, because if you go to school with one corporation, they guarantee you employment and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
You
Oh, and
also
they also de-emphasize currency. They talk about how like there's real money and then there's loyalty currency.
loyalty points, which you
Yeah.
can exchange for real money, which we find that Clive has done to secure himself one of these bungalows, correct?
Yeah.
16 tons of what do you got? Another day older and deeper in debt.
Yeah, I love that song.
Yeah.
So it kind of sets up this very almost
this
dystopian sense of the companies ruling the world. And I thought that was actually a really interesting way of setting it up.
Yeah, I think it's interesting too because they used real world company names, even if they use different logos and whatnot. Companies like Amazon, it's kind of like,
yeah.
I thought it was kind of cute too. This is one that was de-emphasized, but there was a mention of Google Tesla in the crossword that you find later.
Wait, so Tesla bought Google, or did they merge?
It was Google dash Tesla, so I'm assuming Google bought Tesla.
Well, that's interesting. Yeah.
I wonder if that's scary.
Yeah, because also this is a very interesting piece of world building that we haven't mentioned on the topic of corporations. Everything on the ship is Venturis branded. There's a lot of really detailed like medicines and objects floating around, or that you can just pick up in these different areas, and they all have like ingredient lists and exceptionally detailed textures, and they're all produced by Venturis Corporation, which is very interesting.
Yeah.
One of the ultra detailed things that I found was that I picked up a clipboard once, and as I was turning it around, because as you pick up objects, you can right click and then move your mouse around to like look at the object in 360. And I found that on the back of the clipboard, there were fingerprints that reflected off the light, or rather didn't reflect. And that's how you could tell that they were fingerprints. I was like, wow, they went to the trouble of like reducing the reflections so that you could see the fingerprints on this. That's ridiculous.
Yeah.
I mean, speaking of details, I remember I was looking around in Clive's personal quarters, and I just out of curiosity, I checked the trash can, and I did find 2 letters, one from Carnival basically saying, thank you for applying here again, but we're not going to rehire you because you bailed on your last contract. So since you didn't fulfill the terms of your previous contract, you're barred from basically being rehired for, now and forever. And then another application, which was to another letter from Hilton that was basically saying, we're sorry, we're not going to hire you this time, even though you went to university here. That doesn't guarantee you a job because you left. And both of those were kind of setting up this idea that actual brand loyalty was really important in this universe.
It's more than just a brand. It's like life.
Yeah.
It's almost like they're a governmental power at that point.
It's just, I think calling it brand loyalty is like underselling it. But...
Well, yes, it's there's not really a great word for it at this point, but it's brand loyalty to the point of being basically,
the world of Tacoma definitely feels like post-government, like industrial society.
Yeah.
Although it's interesting because a lot of games with that theme are very like I want to say Blade Runner or Dark. And
I mean, the countries do kind of exist, but they're sort of changed. So looking through my notes, there was one part that talked about like the one person, Roberta, was from Dallas, and the country was Freedom Republic.
Yeah, I heard that. I was like, whoa.
There was another one. I'm trying to figure out where in my notes this was. Oh yeah, they mentioned Singapore. In fact, there was a coin from, it was like 2085, and it was saying it was the 120th year of their independence. And I looked it up, and that was accurate. Singapore declared independence in 1965.
Oh wow.
And so they actually got that year right. And so they mentioned that one. And then the other one was someone was from Vancouver, if I remember correctly. I'm trying to remember where my notes.
There was
I
think there was a concert in Vancouver in one of the rooms, that like a concert poster that they said it traveled to Vancouver. And
yeah, Evie was from Vancouver, but the country on the the ID said C-FN, and looking elsewhere, I found it was Cascadia First Nations. And I looked it up, and apparently Cascadia is sort of a geological region where some people have talked about it declaring independence, which includes kind of a very western strip of Canada and into kind of Washington and Oregon.
Interesting.
Yep. Cascadia represent.
Yeah.
two out of three of us are Cascadia,
so.
Actually.
Yeah. It's like this is the first,
and
that's the first time
also
hearing of this.
Where Tacoma is. There's a city called Tacoma about 30 minutes south of me.
Yeah, I know where Tacoma is.
Yeah, I live near Seattle, just for reference, but
I think it's interesting that they just went all out and called the game Tacoma, because there's a car called Tacoma, there's a city called Tacoma, there's a constellation called Tacoma.
It makes it somewhat difficult to search for, but I don't know that it needed to be called Tacoma, but it was, I guess. So
well, just type in Tacoma video game is the first thing that pops up, but just typing in Tacoma, it's like you get the city of Tacoma.
Yeah.
So in addition to all these like really cool world building things, which are awesome, you can augment that. There's these other, for each crew member, there is a shorter AR log that just shows them, usually in their room, sometimes just in basically their favorite place to hang out. One of them is in a shower, I think.
Those are more or less just like character building.
Yeah, like
one was smoking in the maintenance tunnels.
Yeah, that was pretty good. Evie's was her playing guitar at a room and singing. That was nice.
Yeah.
I wanted to leave the shower one. I was like, I shouldn't be here.
Yeah, just for reference, the characters in this game are very blobby, almost genderless. You can tell, obviously, because their voices and because you can hover over them, but
just their silhouettes, you can tell.
It's not that the shower scene was very like lewd or anything.
No, I mean, it's still just like, I shouldn't be here. Also, those are really open showers. Just saying.
Yeah.
Those are some prison-esque showers.
One thing I thought was funny, like a very small detail, was that character who was found in the showers right outside of the gym is the character where if you open up the locker, there's a big note in there that says, "I'll exercise when I die." And if you look at like the exercise logs, it's like last time exercise 360 days ago.
Yep. I like that one. That one kind of made my day when I saw that. Oh dear.
So speaking of which, because that lockers, if you're going in chronological order, those lockers are the first instance of the actual puzzles you end up finding in the game, which is kind of interesting. There's a bunch of locked doors with a keypad, and you have to find the code to get in. And one thing I realized, like halfway through, is that other than one instance, I found two ways you could always get the passcode. One way is that somewhere it will be written down. You either need to look at someone's, view page, or you need to look around for a sticky note on the wall, or wherever it would be written down somewhere. But you could also just open up the keypad and rewind till someone opens the door and look at the buttons they're pressing. And so there's like always two ways to get into the door.
Did you do that blind because you only ever used one of those methods? Which one did you use?
Looking for the thing.
Yeah.
I was gonna say that's like the vastly more difficult way.
Yeah, I figured that was the way you had done it because the only time I didn't find a code for the door was the one door you couldn't open, which was the door Evie goes through during obsolescence day.
Which, no,
Into her office? Yeah.
She goes in there and presses the buttons.
Yeah, but I was saying I don't remember seeing the code written down anywhere, and that's the only one I never saw written down.
Oh, I see what you're saying. You didn't see it written down. Yeah, I was gonna say you can still go in there. I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Well, so did you never go in Evie's office blind?
No, not until the very end.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, at the very end. What do you mean?
Went back and backtracked.
Okay, so you went, and that's how you found. So you found the code, or you found that?
I went back and then we Googled it and found the code.
Yeah. You Googled it.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, I thought that was kind of one of the more interesting. There's not very many mechanics in this game, but that was a good mechanic, I think.
The only other puzzle mechanic is in like each of the three major areas, well, at least two of them, you can find a physical key, usually hidden in someone's drawer or in a locker, and there is a locked device somewhere they can get into, and there's usually something hidden in there.
Really?
There's one key in one of the lockers.
I found the key. Didn't find the device though.
It's to open up the drawer under the bed for the shoot, what's his name? The operations specialist, so Clive. In Clive's bedroom, there's a locked room, and so you get the key out of his locker.
So what's in there?
It was just there was some like notes and stuff that hinted at just some story stuff. Most of it was just story stuff. The other one is in the nurse's office. You get the key from her desk drawer, and it opens up a cabinet in the supply closet.
Oh, really?
And from there, you can see a newspaper clipping about her incident 3 years ago, which, speaking of which, that is also pertinent to the story.
Okay.
What happened to the nurse. So in kind of about halfway through the game, they start hinting at this event that happened about 3 years prior to the nurse, Sarah, in the game, because what had sort of happened was someone had came out of cryo and went into her care, and then he ended up dying. And so
was it that he came out of cryo? I don't think it was. I think there was just some accident. It was the Paradise Fountain station that there was some accident, and she and
from what I understood, it was kind of subtle, but from what I got, particularly from the newspaper clipping, was that he was kind of taken out of cryo for something, and Sarah was saying she never really saw him alive or awake, and so it's possible that maybe he had died through cryo. But they also mentioned cryos, like if someone sustains an injury that they can't heal at that time, they'll often put them into cryo for basically getting them somewhere where they can actually be healed. And so they probably came in from cryo, or maybe it was like, was having some serious issues, whatever. And, Sarah was unable to help him and he died. And so there ended up being a lawsuit about it. Venturis was trying to play defensive about it. And Sarah was claiming that the AI basically was having problems at that point. It wasn't able to help. And it was the AI's fault that he ended up dying. But Venturis was denying that. And even to this day, you can see in her desk a letter from Ventura saying, we'll open you up to more possibilities to be able, for new job opportunities if you just admit fault to that incident. And she still refused, and she said, I'll just stay here.
So this is something cool, too, that I noticed. She blamed the AI, and this was at the Paradise Fountain Station. In the last room in Natalie's office, there is a map that shows the AIs of a bunch of different stations of Venturis headquarters, the Lunar Station, Tacoma, etc. And there's one, and you find that the AI at the Paradise Fountain Station is Heka, or something like that.
Heka.
Yep. And then on Natalie's desk, there is a graph of Heka's AI scores, and they drop
Yep.
dramatically right before around about that time.
And in fact, that was on her desk because Sarah had asked Natalie to look up that information because she was like, I just want to know what was going on with this. And so she looked through the support history, and next to that graph is a ticket that basically, little note that said, like, we're seeing more and more degradation of the scores for the AI. It's not critical at this point, but we're worried it's going to be. And then right below that, it's a note from Ventura saying, this is your last support ticket for the quarter. Are you sure you want to send this? And they're like, no, I guess we'll hold off.
Yeah.
Which is terrifying.
Support ticket quote.
It's interesting because like this game itself is extremely cheery. Kind of like everything's bright and colorful and it's nice to look at, and the voice acting is really soothing and it's pleasant to play. But when you start reading into the flavor text, it gets dark quickly.
Yeah,
it's very dystopian
in a very interesting
some
way.
Ways.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of like little details that are meant to kind of build up this terror. So to kind of continue with the plot, so after this apparent strike by debris that lost oxygen supply and communications, they're trying to figure out how to basically survive this. They decide that kind of non-important personnel would go into cryo, while Natalie and Bert, the network specialist and mechanical engineer, would try to basically retrofit this what they call it, the
cargo. It's like a cargo module or something.
Yeah, a cargo drone, whatever. Fit it for actually human to survive, so that they can all go down to the lunar surface, since they're basically orbiting the moon at this point. And the botanist ends up getting them a little bit more air supply by bumping up the algae growth and other things like that.
And they start volunteering to go into cryo to save the oxygen a little bit.
So they're volunteering to go into cryo. And so the medic, Sarah, ends up having everyone go through the scans. And if you get the code to look at the actual panel where all the scans were, you can look at Natalie's scan, which says that she has heart murmurs and that she would have like an 18% chance of survival if she went into cryo. And it's a whole story about it, talking about how Sarah decided not to tell her that if her best chance for survival would be going into cryo, she'd put him into cryo, knowing that would be a better death than asphyxiation.
Yeah. So
very dark.
Yeah. What was I gonna say? We start to get a little bit more background when they concoct this plan about Andrew too, because everybody's gathered in one place and Evie's putting forth this story, and they're like, oh yeah, let's do this. And then if you follow Andrew, he'll say, Andrew is the botanist of the crew. He goes into his own room, and then Sarah follows him and she asks, what's wrong? And he's like, I don't want to do this. I won't do it. I know I felt peer pressured at the time, but I'm not going to do it. And part of that reason is because he wants to maintain his loyalty points, because basically by doing this, they're subverting Venturas's wishes in some ways. And so he's like, I rely on that because I have a son and he's going to one of these corporate universities. And if I give up that, then he's going to be in a bad spot and I won't be there to help him.
Yeah.
Let's
actually, that brings it up. I mean, he was very hesitant to go into cryo, though. A lot of it was he was worried about, just kind of what would happen and all that stuff. But right before he goes to see Sarah, because he wanted to Sarah wanted to do a checkup on everyone before they maybe went into cryo. When he went over there, he has his thing up, and if you look at that, you'll find that the AI Odin had sent him a little page from the handbook that he had requested, and they include kind of what happens after you die. But there's QR codes next to each of them.
I like that.
And if you scan the QR codes, they paint a very different picture. And I wrote this down. So the first
So
point,
what do the QR codes send you to? Because I didn't bother to like
they
scan
don't send you anywhere. It's just text.
it.
So
Okay, so it's just text.
So the first note was transport of remains and funeral arrangements are paid for by Venturis. You scan the QR code and it says up to a cap of $2,999 SGD. The second point, some corruption. So corruption, loyalty, and any additional Venturis accident insurance that the contractor has invested in are immediately transferred to the contractor's specified beneficiary. QR code pending verification by Venturis corporate fraud investigator. And then the third point was compound loyalty continues to accrue corruption contract term, and then the QR code based on loyalty value at time of death. And so it's basically the asterisks that they hid the asterisks in these QR codes.
That's really
dark,
shady and clever.
Yeah.
Because who the hell owns a phone with a QR code? Although one complaint I do have about QR codes, whereas this is still very cool. Who the hell would be using QR codes 100 years into the future?
Yeah.
Like, seriously.
I think it's just an artifact of how we have to interface with the game in our day and age and with our level of technology.
I mean, I guess, but like that's outdated tech now.
So what would be, do you have an idea of what you think would be a better way to portray that information?
Not really, it just takes me
like
out
a secretive way.
It just takes me out of it.
That makes sense.
So I'm trying to
I was gonna
think of something that goes along the lines of that.
Yeah. I was going to ask, what do you guys think of the corporate like motivations of the characters? Because we see corporate motivations easily from Clive and Andrew in particular. Andrew for his son, and Clive because first he was trying to get back with Carnival, and now he's like afraid to break another contract because that might be another company that he's locked out of.
And Bert. There's in like the very first thing you can see with Bert, if you open up her panel, there's a communications with sort of an online counselor where she's talking about how she feels like she's holding Natalie back, that this was the best job that Bert could get and that Natalie could get something better, but she took this lesser job to be with Bert and that she feels guilty about that.
Yeah. Natalie and Bert are a couple.
Well, married. They've been married for like
really?
2 years.
I missed that.
If you look, there's a wedding photo on their computer.
Okay. Yeah, I missed that. But yeah.
It's somewhat confusing if you don't know, but Bert is short for Roberta. So.
Yeah, that actually took me a while to figure out because they were referring to Bert. I was like, who the fuck is Bert? Like, yeah. I don't know. Oh, it's okay. Never mind. I get
talking about like Bert and Ernie here. From,
yeah. No, I was just really confused. I was trying to figure out who they were referring to for a good while there.
Yeah. So it's kind of, it paints a dark picture of what society is, but at the end of the game, which we'll get to, there's a kind of ray of hope that it makes it look not so bleak for the future of society. Because right now, the equivalent of that right now in my mind is like with our war to protect net neutrality, we have all these giant ISPs, especially in the States, where 90% of ISPs are under two names. It's Time Warner and Comcast.
Yeah.
And so that it's very similar in that respect.
I'm just gonna put one thing forward real quick. This game is excessively political. So yeah, if we get into politics, that's just a thing that's gonna happen.
I mean, there's a political commentary to be derived from it, but I don't think that the main plot of the game focuses a lot. Actually, I guess you're right. We haven't really gotten into it, but later on, they're specifically revolving around the Human Oversight Accord. That's a very big issue for Venturis, and it's kind of one of the parallels. Their main competitor is Carnival. Carnival is working around the Human Oversight Accord, and they're doing these cruises, whereas Venturis wants to save money by having everything be completely automated. So which they cannot do. They've built this huge system of
The human oversight accord essentially is stating that you can't just have a station run by AI, you need to have people watching it.
Yep.
And
so they built this whole belt of luxury homes, and it's illegal to run them the way that they have them set up, basically.
Yeah, which is purely on AI.
Yeah, which is why they were effectively lobbying for a bill to overturn the human oversight accords, which they called they had a good name for it, orbital safety bill.
Yeah.
And the basic argument behind that is that human error is effectively eliminated if everything is run by AI. But I mean, we already have told of a story in Sarah's case of an AI who's like,
because they're learning, they're not perfect AI. It's like,
yeah, they're literally organic matter, and they have to learn just not the same as a human brain would, of course, but actually this is worth mentioning a little bit out of timeline because it doesn't really affect the story that we're going through. But when you take the AI at the end, it's like a cross section of a brain that's about,
it's like a square flat brain that fits into a drawer.
Yeah.
It's
or like a floppy disk. It's like a floppy disk if a floppy disk were a brain. For those of you who remember what floppy disks are, it's probably like 2/3 my chat.
I didn't actually realize that the AI was, as they say, wetware until the end, because I don't know, I just didn't pick up on that until later.
I was imagining a brain in a jar, but I think that like the brain in a drawer is much better.
Yeah. It was a very interesting and reasonable way to do that.
Yep. Grown matter.
So, okay, so then after they have the talk about the plan and Andrew's concerned, what's the next one that we have here? The botany one.
Well, maybe we should just move on to that last third of the game.
Yep.
Yeah. So yeah, we talked about the basically right after the botany area with Andrew concerned, it was the medical area, which we talked about a little bit. They have to go through their medical checks before they go into.
There's also a literal skeleton in the closet in the medical room.
Yeah, that startled me. I was like, wait, well, okay. I mean, this is the doctor's office, but like that's still ominous.
There's an achievement involving that skeleton. You have to find its skull and put a hat on it.
Wait, what? Hold up.
Yeah. There are some really funny achievements in this game. There's one where there's a basket in 0G and you have to make a 3-point basket. There's another one where you find that skeleton in the closet and you have to find the head in the locked cupboard, and you get the hat and you put the head on the skeleton and the hat on the head, and you get an achievement. And the other one is you have to take that skull, bring it back up to 0G, and then make a basket with the skull.
Oh my gosh, that's pretty hilarious.
I did see the skull, but I didn't think about picking it up. I also need to mention, this is totally off topic to any stories, but you can interact with so much stuff in this game. It's a little bit silly. There's actually a really, really, really good pool simulation in this game. Like, billiards. You can play billiards, and it's good. Like, you can pick up the sticks. Aiming's a little wonky, but you can like crouch down and like aim and like point at the ball and literally play billiards.
Yep.
Just needs a pinball table and I'd be happy.
Okay. So then once you finish up in the biomed area, you go to the engineering bay, and that's where Natalie and Roberta are creating or retrofitting the cargo
drone to fly them to the moon.
Yeah. So basically it has to, like, they list all the like problems in one of the memories that you have to find. It's
not
like
designed to carry people. It's not designed to be sealed with oxygen. It's to deflect radiation, because you can get cancer like so easily if you're exposed to the sun's radiation. Yep.
In space.
Yeah. So there's a lot of problems, and you can see them their figures basically miming working on it, because you can already see that it's all destroyed and
still there.
Yeah. And then an explosion happens, and Sarah runs in to help them.
Yeah.
And then they're like,
Bert receives the world's worst CPR. First off, did a poor job of checking for a pulse, never checked for the breath, did the compressions way too high, like you're supposed to do it below the breast, and did it on the right side of the body.
As somebody who, well, I mean, you have medical people in your family, and as somebody who's been through excessive first aid training in my life, no movie or video game has ever gotten CPR right.
Yeah,
Which
yeah,
means if I need CPR, I'm gonna die because someone's gonna be pumping on my neck. Anyway,
Yeah.
it's like you're actually just
Often-
choking the guy.
Often correct CPR will break people's ribs.
Oh, yeah.
which-
yeah. No, if you're not breaking ribs, you're pretty much not doing it right.
yeah. So, anyways, she revives her. She revives her, but like Lewis said, it was a terrible rendition. And then they're like, and the fire breaks out, and they manage to put it out with a fire extinguisher. But they're like, wow, this fire took up so many hours of our oxygen. Andrew had created an algae bloom so that more of the carbon dioxide would be filtered out of the air, so that gave them more time. But they just wasted that time. They already have 3 people in cryo. But
now our mechanics are injured.
Yeah, and the ship is not going to fly. But their one escape plan was pretty much done.
Yeah.
and so Sarah kind of goes off to one side and is like, well, this sucks. And then she starts talking to Odin, and Odin's like, listen carefully, Sarah. I am not telling you what to do.
There is a door that is normally locked. Someone could go check on that door before you all went into cryo.
It was interesting because during this portion, my entire chat's just like, "Oh, he's gonna kill you. You're gonna die. The AI is going to horribly murder you. No, you're gonna die."
So
you're dead.
let's talk about that for a moment then, because the first AI that you meet in the game is Minnie, which Blind said he already hated.
It's the most annoying goddamn voice in the game.
Okay.
No, it's so good.
I love Minnie. Minnie is so cute.
Minnie's fine, but fuck Minnie.
I had the instinct to trust Minnie, whereas like there's a lot of stories where the AI is the evil person in the story, right?
Yeah, that's the trope.
Yeah, that's the
Thanks,
trope.
Since
And
And then
2001.
once I saw Odin, I was like, well, he's probably the bad guy. But now we have him helping Sarah, and it's like, well, okay, what's happening? So I should go over a few of the other like glitchy messages that you get as you're doing the AR recordings. Like the first one I said that you see is death sentence, and then you see please, and then I tried, and then cared for them, and right before
care for them.
yeah, and then it's allies, which is as you're transferring down to the engineering bay, which was still a little bit different, and then maybe, and that's where we've gotten to up in the story so far.
Yeah.
And so Sarah decides to go and investigate this door. She's like, well, I guess
There's
sure.
nothing else to do.
Well, yeah, she basically has no other choice, and it's pretty obvious Odin is telling her to do it.
The other two are in stable condition.
It's worth pointing out that Sarah, Sarah, the medic at this point, who's pretty much the only one up that's not in cryo or been exploded, she's actually really close with Odin. Pretty much in that whole first part of the game, you see her spending almost all her time talking with Odin. She's talking to Odin at the gym. She's talking to Odin before Obsolescence Day. They kind of set up this idea that they're actually close.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. She is the person out of the crew who talks with Odin the most. I want to say that there are some crew members who almost don't talk to Odin at all. I would say Roberta doesn't.
Yeah.
Or does the least.
Yeah.
I don't think you ever see Roberta actually talk to Odin.
I don't remember her ever talking to him either.
Yeah.
So then Sarah heads off and goes into networking, and that's where you see Natalie's room, which is just being used as storage, and then what she uses as her office, which is like the AI conditioning area.
Also, Natalie is the administrator. Right?
No,
network administrator. Yeah.
The network administrator.
Network specialist. There it is. Network specialist.
Yeah.
She's running the AI.
Mm-hmm.
Why was her room filled up with cat stuff?
Because she was probably staying in Bert's room, and in fact, in front of Bert's room, there's a note that
Right,
says,
yeah.
you know, if it's a rockin', don't come a knockin'.
Yeah, and if it's not rockin', knock loudly.
Yeah.
We actually skipped over something which I thought was pretty. I didn't really like. So they're preparing the
All right.
ship and trying to retrofit it, and
Mhm.
they're Roberta and Natalie are in a room by themselves, and then like they're just kind of having a conversation, and then Nat is just like attacking Roberta, and then they're like, "Oh, let's get busy right here in the storage closet." And actually, from a different point of view,
It's
on the other side
actually,
of the wall, you can hear the crash, and
I
it's
would
like,
argue
yeah,
that that is comedic value.
Yeah.
Because
that
if you're
was
on the
pretty
other side of
funny.
the wall first, you see the thunk. It's like, oh my god, what happened to that? Oh,
I watched Roberta and Nat first
okay.
when I played through, so it's I I don't know. In such like a desperate time, I don't, and maybe
That took me out of it a
there's a
bit.
lot of reasons that it could happen, but I
I
didn't
mean,
like it.
we've all seen Independence Day, I think, and I think we all laughed at Independence Day.
I've seen the cinema sins for Independence Day, so
You've seen Independence Day, right?
no.
Okay. Well, there's a scene in Independence Day where there's these two kids, and they're just like in a van, and they're both kind of main characters. And the guy's like, "You don't want to die a virgin," to the girl, and she just like punches him in the face, and then they just leave. So it's like, you know, I don't know. To me, that took an element of humanity out of it for me a little bit, because I think that they'd be in a level of stress, especially considering they're supposed to be building an escape pod.
You're saying it added a level of humanity or
No,
took away?
it took away a level of it to me, because I think that they would, well, either that or it made it feel like they didn't care about the rest of the crew as much, or at least one of them didn't, because
That's what I
Maybe,
felt.
but if you listen to the dialogue, that's what they were talking about right before that moment.
But I
mean,
don't understand how that transitions into I'm really horny.
yeah,
what happened was they're talking about how they're worried about the other people. Natalie talks about drive partition as an allegory for basically putting down, setting aside your feelings. Bert asks, like, but you still care about me, right? It's like, yeah, I'm still worried about you. It's like, what is this? Is the last time we'll see each other? It's like, well, let's make this count. And that's when Natalie jumps on Bert.
yeah, I don't know, that
That was the transition. I mean, I can understand it. Understand you not liking that, but that was the transition that they went with there.
I saw it as a scene of comedy, because I saw it from the other point of view first, and then to me it was kind of like, come on, guys. I don't know. Maybe that's just me, but that's fine.
Yeah.
Whatever. That's how those characters are, I guess. I mean, they've made that
That's-
clear throughout the game. So.
Yeah, that's fine. It's just I don't think it had a like I could have seen it happening, like say that the observation AR thing didn't happen then, and like you're given a kind of like behind the door thing where you hear like noises, and then like Roberta and Natalie come out of it. I could see that as being more in place before this or like the incident happens.
Yeah. Plus, you're using a lot of energy, and that's a lot of oxygen.
Yeah,
Saying.
that too. These are smart scientific people. They know what the risk is, and they're putting everybody else that's already frozen
Anyway, let's move on.
at risk, right?
Anyways,
So Natalie goes through several hallways, and eventually she finds herself in the room that the AI that Odin is being grown in, and
basically the core.
There's a number of data terminals that you can go around, and when the first AR recording that you see is just her listening to this recording by the CEO of Venturis Corporation, Sergio Venturis.
Mr. Venturis.
It's a recording about this tragedy that has happened on Tacoma, but they're still there.
Yeah.
And,
also,
and it said don't air until after that point.
Can I just mention, when they walk into that room, you get the 2001 vibe from it. It's classic AI hell mind room.
Yeah, dark
from
with
end
like
to end.
Tron
They have
lighting.
black lights.
Floor lights up when you step on it.
Light strips. You have almost like an electronic piano thing when you walk around. The floor makes sounds. It goes boom. It is definitely like AI evil room.
Yeah, and in a couple of the other data terminals, you find that in order to come to this conclusion, Sergio had consulted the AI at Venturis headquarters, Juno, and he was like, trying to figure out what is the most likely way for the human oversight accord to get repealed. And he's like, well, if there was an incident at one of the orbiting stations and everybody died,
Yep.
and then you see the instructions to Odin, it's like, okay, simulate this. Simulate debris striking the space station and that all communications have been cut off. Don't inform the crew. Don't do anything, all this stuff. And Odin asks in response, it's like, won't this put the crew's lives in danger? And they're like, no, we'll send a rescue pod for them. Because they're just being really heartless, cold, corporate.
And you look at another wall,
robots.
Which happens, after the incident. It's like, the recovery ship, is scheduled to take off in 1 hour, so such and such minutes. And it's like, takeoff canceled, rescheduled for not rescheduled. And so Odin's like, there's not, you're not sending that ship. And Venturus was basically like, just keep with the plan. Do not, disobey direct orders.
Don't contact us again. Don't tell the crew.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so clearly Odin decided to take matters into his own hands and disobey his direct order and tell the crew about what happened.
So this is where you learn about the laws about having to have people on the station with AI.
That happens earlier,
really?
If you know where to look.
Oh, well, there's a big panel. There's a big panel explaining all of that, and that's where I learned that. So
okay.
So I guess that's the failsafe if you missed it, which apparently I did. And then
I think I know why you missed it. That was part of the shower scene. You had to look at the messages on her screen, and one of them was a correspondence with Evie talking about.
Yeah, I skimmed them, but I guess I must have missed that detail. There's a lot of text in this game, and I have a hard time with a lot of text. But anyway, there's
also you were streaming, so it's harder to like make people sit there and watch the text.
If I had time, I would have played through it again, but I didn't. And then because you are not experiencing these events live, your character then goes and pulls the AI out of its socket. You unplug Odin, and
but you also see that Sarah had sent out a distress signal once she turned back on the relays, basically.
Yeah. And then you start walking out. Then we come to the end.
Yeah, and so you go all the way back out through the center, and this is where I did the observation thing, which, because I
did it first. I don't know why.
Area where there's no artificial gravity.
Yeah.
That was one of the most sickening and visually like distracting areas. Like I couldn't stay in there. Like I had to have my UI up to cover it because everything is spinning because it's in a series of 3 rings to simulate.
This game also doesn't have a super wide FOV, so that doesn't help.
There's an FOV slider, but it doesn't go all that wide.
It's not wide enough. Not wide enough for that room.
Was there an FOV slider? I didn't see it.
I did. It's in the settings.
Okay.
Yeah. But there's basically only 4 settings, and it's on the 2nd setting by default.
Okay. Anyway, and then you come out, and essentially, you find out that the medic who went and examined the AI, I guess, got help somehow.
Yeah, once she took out the AI, she was able to actually.
No, not one. She didn't take out the AI. You take out the AI.
Yeah.
But Odin instructed her how to enable the comm systems again, which I'm not really sure how that worked with the instructions that he was given. But Sarah was able to enable the SOS message and sent out something.
Yeah.
And sent out
a distress signal, basically. Yeah. And the ship, which Clive's friend was on, that Carnival cruise, which was making a shot around the sun, heard the message and sent a rescue pod to them. So the rescue pod was going to go to Tacoma, get the people on, and then get them back to the Carnival cruise spaceship to go to Jupiter.
Yeah.
I mean, just responding to something in chat, some people are just susceptible to motion sickness more than others.
Yeah. Like, I mean, one thing I thought was interesting about that room was, with all that spinning stuff, it would be easy enough to get disoriented, but the game locked your roll, so you couldn't actually like spin with it.
Yeah.
You were always kind of fixed vertically. I mean, you can. They stopped the up and down limit, so you could like look all the way backwards. But if you tried to then like rotate side to side, it would kind of lock until you rotated back around. It was really weird.
Hmm.
You could also fix your orientation by trying to interact with the observation deck door. It would spin you around.
Yeah.
But anyways, when you pop back out into that 0G area, you get another recording, which is them coming out and floating over to the exit.
Yep.
And leaving. And then the ending happens.
And they still have the cat.
So
that's good.
what were you guys? How were you guys expecting this game to end? At that point.
Okay, I was still convinced at that point that I was a junkie for Venturis Corporation and that they had jury-rigged the ship with this, like, we didn't mention this at the beginning, but as you walk out of the ship that you go to the Tacoma with, there's this like
Big
plywood
box.
boarded up area that says AI receptacle or something.
I missed that on the way in, but there definitely
And
is like,
I was like,
this weird
oh,
janky
that's
thing.
weird. And
Yeah.
so my assumption was that Venturis would be like, okay, shoot, we have to get all this together really quick, and we'll just do this and get a contractor and they'll go up and do it.
Oh, also in the AI room, there's a note saying that you have, or AIs that are proven faulty have to be reset and retaught.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They mentioned when they're leaving, basically what will happen then is like they'll probably take it back,
Yeah, and then
completely
it's
reset
mentioned.
it.
Yeah.
They'll
And-
replace the AI while they rebuild it.
When I put in the brain drawer into the machine that was all boarded up, I thought that I would be given a choice to do it or to not do it. But there's not really a choice. You just have to do it to proceed. And at that point I was upset because I was like, well, now the corporation wins, right? Because they've been exposed, but they'll just deny it if they can erase the AI, right?
Yeah.
Now
I will say, oh, sorry, but I will say that, you asked what did I think the ending was going to be. I wasn't really kind of predicting what I thought the ending was going to be, because I was kind of thinking they may go in a way sort of Event Zero, where there's not one ending. You sort of get a weird pseudo choice thing going on. But I will say I am happy they didn't. I think having a single clear ending made the game better.
Well, because an interesting little piece of flavor text which I found in the room in Natalie's room with all the storage, there is a piece of like a pamphlet. You have to knock a bunch of boxes over, but there's a pamphlet, and you can rotate the pamphlet and look at the back of it, and it has like a fist on it, and it basically says "for freedom of AI," and it says we are a society for free AIs. AIs are people too, essentially. Like,
yeah, I mean,
don't
don't
oppress computers.
Yeah, like the tagline on the top is, "Are you conscious?"
Yeah, I know. I saw that. I was like, okay, I need to read this.
Yeah, and I mean, I didn't really think of much of it at the time. I thought that was interesting because I hadn't seen any other reference to this society before, but it made sense that Natalie, being the AI specialist, the network specialist,
would want that.
Would want that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't quite get a clean first experience of the game because I did watch Blind live stream it. But when I first time I played it, after some context from Blind Stream, I was able to pick up a very kind of subtle hint, which is Sarah getting a contact from Natalie for this character named Hansen, I think it was.
Yep.
Hassan, whatever. And
Hassan Shop. Nice.
His icon is a dog with a monocle and other things like that. But they kind of get this sense that it's very clear that he is part of this AI liberation by the very end.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of little hints that you're with him as well. For example, you already mentioned that box.
I'll be back in a minute. Just keep talking.
That big kind of wooden structure where you slot Odin into. That box on the other side says, like installation verified by H. And if you look at all those messages with, Hudson or whatever, Hansen, he often just is referred to by H.
I didn't pick up on that until you mentioned it right now, actually. I thought that H was just a mystery. And this is one of I wasn't paying close enough attention, but when you use the device to collect the AI from each of the different modules, there's some like text that appears there, and it all is signed by H.
Yeah, well, it's not all signed by H. I think they say H comes on occasionally and is like, hey, yo, yeah, this is H here, blah, 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 blah. Okay, a regular operator is back. I gotta go.
Yep.
Yeah. So that was interesting. But we haven't actually mentioned the actual ending yet. Is that when you sit down in your ship to depart, Odin appears on the screen, and
So
you
she
read him,
loads him up. It says loading AI, and then she's like, "Hello, Odin. How are you?" Basically.
and she basically says to him, "Okay, so we're from the AI Liberation Front, right?
Yeah. She
Foundation."
reads it off of the little book that she had been grabbing the AI with.
It's almost like being read your Miranda rights.
Like, yeah, you have the right to remain silent. Yeah.
But
Except a bit more friendly. It's more like we are with the AI Liberation Front. I forget the term that they use. We recognize your consciousness. We would like to take you to, we would like to give you asylum at, wherever it was. Do you accept? And so it's kind of a formality to basically say, Odin, do you want to actually do this?
And they're recognizing his rights as a sovereign entity, right? Basically.
Yeah.
As opposed to something that's owned by Venturis Corporation.
Exactly.
Yeah. And he says, well, looking at my other options, I guess I have to go with you, basically.
And he said, like, yeah, I guess, considering my other options, I will say yes.
And that was very vindicating for me, because after I put the AI in the slot, I was like, well, this sucks. What are we doing now? And it's like, oh, look. And it was also happy because we got to hear Minnie again at the end.
It's funny that that you say it was vindicating and like kind of happy, because Lewis sent me a message the night I finished, or like the day after I finished it, like late at night. I think it was last night. Was it last night? Anyways, sent me a message saying I finished Tacoma, and I was like, "What'd you think?" And he's just like, "I liked it," and I was like, "Cool. I'm just happy we got to play a feel good game." Because like the ending made me warm and fuzzy, because it did.
Yeah,
legitimately.
A lot of the games, like even with the dark overtones of this game, it's a very liberating feeling game at the end, because of the message that you get from the AI Liberation Front.
Can I just say that I am so happy to finally have a piece of media where an AI is a central focal character and is not the villain?
Yeah.
Like, thank you.
To be fair, there were villain AIs in here. Juno was a villain. He was the one who advocated killing 6 people, basically.
Yeah. And a side note, Ventura sends you a couple of emails, like about 8 emails throughout the course of the game. But right before you finish, Juno sends you a message and it's like, I'm taking over from here. Here are your instructions. Get that AI back to Venturis. Do not dilly-dally.
But I would agree with you in that Juno was not a main character, and that his AI, and that the AIs that were present in the game, Odin, was a interesting and genuine character.
Yeah.
And frankly, Juno wasn't as much of a villain as it was Venturis, because Juno said, sure, the way you can do that, get this to happen is to kill all those people. But it was Venturis that pulled the trigger. He's the one that sent the message to Odin to actually do it.
Yeah,
that's true. It's very endemic of AIs to, when given a task, just find the most efficient way to do it with the least cost or hit to like stock value, basically, for Venturis, and that's basically what Juno did. So yeah, basically it's not an evil AI, but if it had been given a sense of morals in keeping with human morals, it may not have even suggested that in the first place.
Well, I mean, Odin's morals in this game is to keep the people alive. So
yeah.
Would you?
I'm talking about Juno in this case, though.
Oh, okay, gotcha. Sorry.
Juno was, hold on, I have in my notes what each of the AIs were and what their roles were. Yeah, Juno was like the Italiano HQ, according to that poster.
Juno was on Earth.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Which it's interesting.
Sorry, I'm just looking at chat now, and that question is just, how do you define human morals? How do you define human morals? It depends on the human.
I was giving a very particular implication when I said human morals, and without delving in too deeply, my implication is what I meant.
Yeah.
Anyways, yeah.
I would like to talk about one particular area of the game in which I did not enjoy, which was the relationships between the crew members. Namely, that we have two gay couples and one straight kind of
Two gay
lovebird.
couples?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, technically we only have one half of the gay couple because Andrew has a husband back on Earth, and then there's
I missed that one.
Natalie and
Yep.
Roberta.
Yeah, he has a husband back on Earth, and he talks about wanting to spend. He talks about his son's father.
Yeah.
And then there's a message where he sends a message back to Earth. In case of him not surviving, it's like, if you receive this message, basically his will. It's like, if you receive this message, honey, I'm sorry we can't spend the rest of our life together. And that is to his husband. So.
Okay.
Yeah, and I have no problems with those types of relationships, but I feel that in this particular game, seeing as we have two examples of that, it almost feels like they're trying to check off boxes, and they're like, oh, we have to be inclusive of everybody. So
also, do we want to dive into this?
This is a very touchy issue, but I think that it's a slice of the universe of humanity that is probably like, if you picked 6 random people who happen to be this, it's like 20%. You never get a section that's this. I don't
unless they did that intentionally when putting the people onto the chip.
Yeah, because like if we're looking at stereotyped roles,
that's actually kind of a valid comment. No risk of pregnancy.
Sure, whatever. But if we're looking at stereotyped roles too, we have Sarah, who's like the fitness nut. We have Roberta, who's the fat
every
person.
stereotype.
We have the black people, the Indian people, the tall people, the short people. It's like, what? How do we arrive at this set of people? And I think the characters are very interesting. It's just
it suffers from the Overwatch problem of there's so much diversity it's meaningless.
I don't see that so much as a problem. I mean, in large part because they're silhouettes 90% of the time.
It didn't bother me in the context of the game.
Yeah.
But afterwards, thinking about it, was like, oh, now that I think about it, that's a little, okay. It doesn't take away from the experience of the actual game for me, but thinking about it in context, and in the context of, well, this is Fulbright. They're going to be pushing an agenda. If you played the first game, you know that, which is fine. But in the context of the situation, it didn't take away from it for me. It didn't cause any problem.
I really don't think it took away from the story, but my main, like I said, my main issue with it was that it's a slice of life that it wouldn't happen. I mean, we often focus on unique stories in games, but the fact that we have this set of people who fulfill these sets of roles and also fulfill this set of stereotypes and diversity, it's like, wow. And
Star Trek does this, and Star Trek does this better.
It's something where I think, I understand that there's kind of this over diversity or whatever, but I'm not sure I agree with the term stereotype being used there, because there's not a lot of stereotypical behavior. Like the fat one isn't always seen eating, and the workout one isn't like always seen in the gym, and
there are definitely stereotypes, because, like, for example, Berta, when you end up in her office, it's like America. Like and then whenever you end up with I think it's her wife, it's just like weeb shit everywhere. Like there's just like the shittiest boy band that looks like
Well,
it was,
it's
hey, we
some sort of,
paid
like,
6
J-pop
cosplayers.
thing.
Yeah, like J-pop or K-pop or whatever. Boy band everywhere. So they are stereotyping the characters, but that also makes them feel real because you're only spending 2.5 hours with them, give or take 30 minutes.
And keep in mind, other than the small vignettes that honestly don't tell you too much, all you're seeing is about 4 days worth of them. Without,
Not
over
even.
characterization, you're not going to know much about them.
It's like a short film in the amount of time you have with them, and that is a very short period of time, which is why you have stereotyping, because you need to communicate a character, who they are, their agenda, in a very short period of time with very little information. Admittedly, this game dumps a lot of information on you for the amount of gameplay there actually is in this game.
Yeah.
But yeah, I
think that
go ahead.
It's also validated more by the fact that they're in a crisis situation, so emotions are at a very high level, and the tensions are very high.
Yeah.
And so I could see that the actions that they're taking, they seem perfectly reasonable to me.
Yeah, they're very believable characters. Like the voice acting is extremely well done. Even like the models, even though they're very blobby, like they move extremely realistically. Like I would be willing to bet this game was mocapped in places. Just the way, like very basic mocap, but still they look like they're mocap because just the way they move, like their hands, it's very, very, very well animated for what they are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'd like to know actually.
And in fact, like the models, like the way they represent it looks like what you would see if you had the dotted mocap capture with like the bone
minus
lines
the balls.
and then yeah, pretty much. But yeah.
So yeah, no, I mean, I think that the over stereotyping thing is fine, and well, not the stereotyping, but the over representation thing is fine.
Yeah, I had no problems with how they chose their characters.
I think it. I don't know. It's hard to say. But
one really strange thought I had kind of when playing this game was that, I really liked it. And I was thinking, if you took Event Zero, took out that whole, typing with the AI prompt mechanic of it, and it's basically, this game is basically just a better version of that. But I realize that's not a fair comparison. You're basically saying, take Event Zero, take out its best part, and it's not as good as this. Like, yeah, it's not a fair comparison, but it's a good, interesting way to compare it if you've played Event Zero, because, it doesn't have that very kind of gimmicky talking with the AI thing, but they took the core of that story and expanded it, added more characters, made it better structured, and did a better job of actually telling the story. And
I still think Event Zero was an interesting thing, but
oh yeah, certainly. And I'm not saying I didn't like Event Zero, but just that I
watch our episode on that.
I think this game did a better job at storytelling, and I really like that.
Yeah.
I also agree with the point that you made earlier, Lewis, that because there was only one ending to this game, it fared a lot better. Because if you'll remember in our conversation on Event Zero, I got the worst ending, or what is the worst ending? It's where you
There's
get stuck
basically
on the ship
6 endings to Event Zero.
3, but yes.
6 ways to get to 3 endings, so.
Yeah. And so, since I got the worst ending, I had a negative experience because of that. And if I had gotten one of the other endings that I found more intriguing and interesting, once I went back and watched them, I would have had a better experience. But I just got the experience that the game creators wanted me to have without having to save scum basically and go back and figure out what I was supposed to do to get the good ending.
Yeah, I actually find the whole multiple endings thing in a lot of games kind of frustrating.
Yeah, this game's also sort of interesting because it doesn't have multiple endings, just more multiple how much you get from the story, because as we mentioned, it's sort of the AR thing. You see where the people are and you can rewind and fast forward, but they're often little things. So there's generally 6 people. They're usually in pairs of 2 having conversations around. So you might you follow one pair for a little bit, and then you rewind and you see what the other pair was doing at the exact same time. Then you rewind and you see what the third pair was doing at that time. Then maybe, they got 2 of them got together. So you see what they're talking about, and you have to rewind and see what the other one was talking about. And there's a lot of kind of going through and trying to find all the details, but you could ignore a lot of that. You could just follow a single character all the way through, or at least try to until they start going into cryo. And it's interesting that they did that. They required you to explore the story.
Yeah. It was kind of almost adventure gaming in that aspect.
Yeah.
Like, actually, you could probably do this game in a point and click.
Yeah.
Yeah, you could with a little, we click the thing.
There's not enough puzzles to be point and click. This is
do it, though.
much less puzzle heavy than a point and click, which is not a bad thing.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's no moon logic, but game.
Speaking of cats, I remember when I was playing this with Fox Tex in chat was watching, and you can find a photo of the cat that you see in the AR. In Evie's room, there's actually a photo of the cat, and I looked at it, and she was like, "Oh, that's like Eggman's cat." So apparently, you have the same sort of cat as Evie.
Speaking of cats,
is that
cat
right?
Is dreaming.
Fun stuff.
My cat
He
is
just
dreaming.
jumped up here, and so.
So right now, my cat is on the couch, right? And this is super off topic to anything, but she's just like dreaming about something because she's sleeping and she's twitching. I'd point the
Oh,
hang on.
So adorable.
Just keep talking about video games.
Dreaming cats are adorable. Well, I mean, did you guys have any like other major problems with the game?
Not really.
I really like the game.
Okay. She's gonna do it again.
But
maybe not. Anyway. Sorry to derail my own show. But no, not really. I don't think I had any inherent issues with the game, with the exception of maybe just there are points, and this is a me problem. I get eye strain. Some of the text is kind of small. But that's a me issue.
They did have a zoom feature, and I like that. You can basically at almost any time press.
Yeah.
If you're using a controller, it's left trigger. I think it might have been like right mouse button or whatever.
Took me a while to find it though. So I don't know why, but I didn't find that button right away. So like the first half of the game was like, it was like, that's why I think I missed some stuff, is because I was like skimming through text, but that as I said, that's a me issue. But yeah, no, I enjoyed the game. As I said, it feels so nice to play one of these things that doesn't end with either everybody dying or you dying, because there's a lot of games in this subgenre of like
space walking simulators,
not necessarily space, but just walking simulators and short narrative experiences that are tragedies, lost loved ones, sad stories. I want to say relationship problems. I guess that's kind of the same as lost loved ones.
I mean, another adventure doesn't end with you dying, but I wouldn't say that's any less grim.
Yeah, grim, depression, and then this one's just like, there's hope for something. Like, this world sucks, but something might nice happen maybe a little bit. And
I agree. It is a very refreshing change of pace from a lot of the games that we've done in the past few months.
Yeah. I mean, we played Jazz Punk. We played funny games, but that was like a year ago. So
yeah.
God.
Maybe we need to play Jazz Punk again. That'll be a good refresher.
Jazz Punk V2. I haven't played Jazz Punk, so.
Replay Jazz Punk. You should play Jazz Punk. You'd like Jazz Punk. Maybe.
Actually, I think I know what game we should do next, but I'll talk about that later.
Anyways, I think we're wrapping up here. We're at an hour and a half. Does anybody have any closing thoughts?
I think I said my main closing thought. I really liked it. But, better storytelling than Event Zero, though still really liked Event Zero.
Cool.
If $20 for a 3-hour space adventure conspiracy sounds really good to you, then yeah, go for it. I would agree. It's definitely, it was worth it for me at least.
Yeah.
So.
I mean, I got like a 33% discount because I think Steam started tracking me because it gave me a coupon right as I looked at the store page for the game. So
why didn't
really
I get
weird.
That?
Yeah. Anyway, so I got like 33% off, and when I played through it twice, I ended up getting like 8 hours in.
Yeah,
no, I think I got my time's worth out of this game.
If you're a little bit sensitive about price cost and you're only going to play it once, maybe wait until it's 30% off.
Yeah,
like get it for the price of a DVD or a Blu-ray. And
I never mentioned the ASL.
Oh,
and
yeah.
This was something I had caught this when Blind was streaming, and I really want to talk about this because whenever your character Amy talks to the computer, she always signs, and I very quickly realized she's spelling things out in American Sign Language. So when you first click, when you have to sign sign an agreement to get in, she spells out her name, using ASL. And towards the very end, there's a part where when you're trying to get the core, you have to first enter in a PIN and then type in essentially a password, and she spells it out in ASL. And then the other major part is she, whenever you try to look at one of the AR recordings that's corrupted, she signs, and I actually had to look up a lot of this stuff because I didn't know. I mostly just know the alphabet and the numbers 1 through 9 and how to sign "I want chocolate." That's about my only extent of ASL. But
The
she was
important
signing,
things.
yeah, "I want chocolate," but she was signing. I think this is like a begin or start, and then
Should ask
she
my girlfriend.
did,
She knows ASL really well.
and then she did fix. And so she's basically saying, start fixing this.
It's, to me, that was actually kind of interesting as a thing, and then that was changed because it was like, well, maybe your character's deaf, maybe your character is mute, but then no.
It was funny. I sent it to my sister, who had a lot more experience with ASL and basically taught me what little I know. And she had responded back because I sent a little video clip, and she was like, she must be deaf or either a child of a deaf person because she signs it really fast. And I thought that was a really interesting observation.
Yeah.
So one thing that I also thought, this is kind of like a side thing, not important to the story, but the guy who died when Sarah was working on her, JJ Pratt, he was like a famous person. He had a travel and food vlog, and his followers were called eggheads. So I found that pretty amusing.
Yeah. Oh, and also your character's left-handed because she signs everything with her left hand.
Oh,
Fun stuff.
interesting.
It's easier when you see it because it's a POV, since it's a first-person game, but you see her left hand come out to do the signs.
Also, another little random anecdote. I ages ago I listened to an interview with one of the developers of this game, and I think it was Giant Bomb, I want to say, and they actually were supposed to release this game about 9 months earlier, to a year earlier. But they remade the entire game. Apparently it was much more of a linear you walk and story is yelled at you initially, and then through testing they were like, well, maybe we don't want to make Gone Home in Space, so they actually added in the like scrubbing through stuff later. It wasn't in the original design doc.
Yeah, I think that was actually a really good choice. It made the game more engaging.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I think that was definitely a choice for the better. But anyways, I just want to say congratulations, Fulbright, and we're looking forward to what you do later. Maybe we'll do an episode on Gone Home at some point. Yeah. Also, there's like thank yous to Campo Santo at the end, and like a bunch of other cool developers that make good games. So yeah, no, I very much enjoyed the game. I will play anything that Fulbright makes next. Maybe not their offshoot companies, because that game was a little bit weird, which we never ended up doing an episode on. But yeah, I enjoyed it. It was fun. So if you enjoyed watching this episode of Story Mode, this is my Twitch channel, and you can find me at twitch.tv/BlindiRL. The show, you can follow the show on Twitter at Real Story Mode. We have a Steam curator, which is just Story Mode, and so you can see any game that we've covered linked in our curator. And Lewis, do you have anything you want to shout out?
I'll do what I always do. I have a Twitch channel, twitch.tv/LRFLEW. I haven't streamed there in quite some time, but now that Intel has released the 8700K, I should finally get a computer up that can actually stream, and should hopefully start streaming in a month or 2 months or so.
Cool. Eggman, do you have anything you want to talk about? Go ahead. Actually,
I was just gonna say I want to stream build in the computer, so watch out for that.
Cool
Stuff. This is a pretty small audience we have here, but if anybody here plays Guild Wars, add me to your friends list. The easiest way to do it is going to be Eggman. I'm on North American servers, so if you want to play with me, just message me and we can have some fun.
Okay. I can also put that on Discord if you want. If you're ever watching my stream and you want the RSS feed, you can just type in podcast RSS, and that'll get you the RSS feed. Also, you can find us on SoundCloud at Storymode. We might be switching to Podbean at some point. You guys are all absolutely fantastic. Normally, for the live audience, we would do an after hours, but it is Thanksgiving's Day here in Canada, so I need to go to my parents' house to go eat turkey.
Have a happy fake Thanksgiving then.
You bastards are late. That's all I gotta say. But yeah, so thank you to everybody who tuned into this lovely episode. And if you have any questions or you want to talk about the episode, just talk about it on Discord. We'll have a fantastic day, I think. Cheers, everybody. Thanks for watching.
Bye.